start of the 1989 Monaco Grand Prix. Now, let's see. Senna gets away. Prost has got a flyer.
1989, the 48th Monaco Grand Prix. 77 laps and a total race distance of 256 kilometres. And of course, James Hunt swearing on the race commentary.
To drive, he says.
And all I can say to that is bullshit.
So, anyway,
these were the glory days of Formula 1 with Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost leading the pack in McLaren's Honda. Nigel Mansell was on his way up but would find himself retired due to gearbox issues. Out of this exciting era would come Super Monaco Grand Prix on Sega's X-board hardware in 1989. This was one of the first fast-paced, realistic depictions of Formula 1 in an arcade game, even including a rear-view mirror to truly place you in the cockpit. But the gameplay was still very arcade-based. After a 45-second qualifying race, you had to race with the best of them to progress. Interestingly, although the track featured many features of the real-life Monaco, the layout was in fact completely different. But it was inevitable that home ports would appear on both the Master System and the Mega Drive. The Master System is a very different beast, placing you in a third-person perspective and failing to capture the true excitement of the arcade cabinet. Even the Spectrum version had a rear-view mirror. The Mega Drive game, however, was a treat for the senses and truly captivated my imagination, taking the controller of my friend's Mega Drive in 1991. I was a big fan of Formula 1 at the time, and the nearest I'd experienced to that point was on my Tyco racing track. But this was something else. This was like being in an F1 car and participating in a real event. Released in 1990 by Sega, the game borrows very heavily from the arcade with its Monaco GP mode, but graces us with a new World Championship, featuring many of the tracks from the era, although in much simpler forms. The 16-bit conversion also lacks most of the scenery and detail found in the arcade, but when you're flying along at these speeds, who the hell cares? The USA course has some of the sharpest turns, but in my opinion also holds the best background scenery of the championship. This Championship edition was then released into arcades on the Sega Megatech system board, which essentially duplicates the Mega Drive hardware into an arcade environment, where players can purchase time credits rather than lives. After selecting your choice of transmission, you can begin. I don't know, seeing a pixelized Mega Drive pad on screen always attracted me. Your controller was in your hand, yet it's also on the screen. It was like merging realities. How did the Mega Drive know what your pad looked like? Oh, it didn't. Never mind. So you begin the season in the lowly Minare team based on the real-life Minardi. And I love these little power output graphs. They probably meant sod all, but all they had to do was set the scene. And it's these little details which separated the 16-bit games from what we'd seen before. We've got some familiar sounding and looking teams and racers here, and after selecting your rival, you can then appreciate their quip and get down to some racing. Beat your rival twice and you'll be offered the chance to drive for his team, with him himself being banished to an even lower race team as a punishment. If you win a season, you'll get a chance to join McLaren, or should I say Madonna, after which you can then begin the next season, defending your championship. In this defensive season you inevitably lose to begin with, and are dropped down to a lower team. In this case, Dardan, and so begins the challenge to get back to the top. Do it again, and the game is beaten. The game takes a little while to get used to, but once you have, and you get on board with the decent teams, things only get easier, mainly because, just like real life, well, in the 90s at least, before all the competitive rules, their cars are much better. This game was very well reviewed on release, and I can understand why. apart from the horrific password system, which is frankly horrifying. This was one of my first tastes of actually feeling part of this racing experience. From the shifting engine sounds to the moving steering wheel, it was the perfect balance between simulation and arcade racer, only really being beaten by the second game, which to all intents and purposes was very similar. Alright, maybe not the engine sounds quite so much. Those racetracks may look simple and outdated now, and the simulated corners feel like you've been spun off a roundabout, but back in 1991 all of this felt as good as it needed to. This felt like the Monaco track, and going through that tunnel, no matter how simplified, was a mind-swelling experience. I could have been controlling a virtual car on a real racetrack for all I knew. Of course, one of the best bits is even being able to smash over the flagman, and with the right cheat, lift your own head at the end of arcade mode rather than the cup. It's all about these little, absolutely mental touches. Its inclusion on Mega Games 3 is more than justified, and although it's not everyone's cup of tea, it's one of the games which made the Mega Drive feel like a must-have device back in the day.